Welcome to the 10th episode of Recipes for Resilience. In this series, I interview women leaders and professionals about various challenges and even adverse experiences that they've experienced in work and life. And more importantly, what kind of strategies have been helpful to keep going or bounce back or even bounce forward. And today's topic, today my guest is Saara Lehmuskoski, and we will be chatting, well, let's see, where do we go actually, but tentatively we have agreed to talk about leadership, and especially female leadership, and also like a wellness and work-life balance, as well as and generally change management, and specifically in the international development sector. And though she has now transitioned to more broader organizational change management role, but I think her 20-year background, that is what we will probably be learning a lot from her. And so welcome, Saara.
Thank you, Pauliina. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And I'm just going to read a little bit more official introduction. So Saara is based in Helsinki, Finland, and her experience of organizational and social change management goes back to 2 decades in the international aid sector in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And she has recently transitioned from non-governmental organization to a senior consultant role at CCEA, a company that focuses on people-driven development or people-driven change. And what I also know about her, just by following her in social media and otherwise, is that when she's not working, she is often in nature. You can see her either in the woods or on the sea. And she's also, I think, one of her key strategies to manage the work-life balance is exercise. And I've learned, I always want to give some little more. I've learned that they've recently got a new family member, a puppy. And yes. I'm sure that's a good strategy also to make sure that you go and get your fresh air on a daily basis, and actually several times a day.
Several times a day, yes.
You are mostly welcome, Saara. And I would
Thank you, Pauliina.
Yeah, I would like to you to just maybe first to share a little bit more about your own personal story and what are the kind of challenges that you have had, and how did you then overcome or move forward, keep going, and if you have some key recipes for us other women to look into, to not to maybe if we have the same challenges, or maybe even that we wouldn't always have the same challenges.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Pauliina. And like I said, a steady sea doesn't make a skillful sailor. So at times the sea has been rough, and it always teaches you something. But like you said, my background goes back 2 decades in development cooperation. In the early years of my career, it was rather in diplomacy. And then I found my way through into development cooperation and humanitarian aid, and have been working with different kinds of employers. So first with governments, the government of Finland, the government of Canada, later the European Union, the European Union's Commission, and the delegation in Congo, in the Republic of Congo, Brazzaville. And then when I came back to Finland, it was into the NGO sector, and now recently into the private sector, which is, I always find it very interesting to see similar things from different angles. And I'm really happy that I've been given this opportunity over the 2 decades to look at the same issue of change and change management and development and kind of the well-being of humanity and human beings from different angles. But yes, of course, at times it is challenging. It's challenging because there's so much work to do. The world is not perfect, and as someone who likes things to be in nice order and well done and give my utmost to everything, then of course it becomes overwhelming at times if I don't manage myself. And being a mother of 2 teenagers now, they were babies and they were not well sleeping babies during several years. So that was a challenging time as well, combined with a lot of work, a lot of traveling for work, a husband who travels for work, and it ended up being a very, very, very consuming situation that had to be solved somehow.
Yeah, and that's maybe something, because I've got the people from different continents listening to us, is that I think, like if you are in Finland, am I right that it's not, we don't usually have like housekeepers or nannies or things like that? So unlike, let's say, here where I'm staying in South Africa, when my babies were small and I was traveling and all that, we had a wonderful person who took over, the household. And then basically, well, we were happy that, or lucky that my husband and myself, we didn't often travel during the same time. So at least one of us was home. But like all the domestic duties and, kids were clean and bath, and there was food to warm up when you come home at work, and the other one is traveling. But this is like, if you were, when your children were small, you were mostly in Finland, not in
We were in Finland. Yes, we were in Finland, and we were both working full time, and we were both working overtime, and there was a household to run. So it was, and we had someone who came to clean once a month. So that was it. So the strategy to survive was to, first of all, share the household duties with my husband at home, or at least try. It doesn't always work, even in Finland, who likes to be seen very equal between men and women, or husbands and wives, or partners, however the family is built. It doesn't always work out that nicely. And then I learned to ask for help from my brothers, from my parents, from my friends, from my neighbors, so that I would build a kind of a network of people that would just pick up the kid from daycare if I couldn't manage it. Or one of my friends, once she knew that I was kind of up to here full of everything, and then she just rang my doorbell one day, and I thought, you might be a little bit busy, so I made you some food. And then she came with meals for 3 days, and I almost cried because it was so lovely of her to do that. So asking for help and reaching out to people usually like to help. So it's not something that you should be shy of doing either. So building a network around yourself, and asking the community around you to give that help, and then you can give back later on.
Yeah, that's a great
If not
tip.
to the same person, then to someone else.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and maybe in certain cultures we sort of maybe tend to mind our own business, and in other cultures it's like it's part of the culture, to the communality and helping each other out. And I think Finland traditionally, now the modern Finland is like mind your own business, but people like to be there if you talk to them. So those were the baby years, and
yes.
And so you stayed in Finland, but you traveled all over. In what kind of position were you that time?
I was working for a Finnish NGO called Finnish Church Aid, FCA, and we were back then growing. They still are. I spent 14 years there, so I still, and I've only left 3 weeks ago, so I still tend to talk we when I talk about FCA. It's hard to switch over speaking we of my new company yet, but that will come, I'm sure. But yes, so the job that I had back then, I've been in managerial positions since 2008. And back then my first child was 2 years old, and then the second one was born quite soon after. And I did take maternity leaves, because in Finland we have long maternity leaves. So I had first 7 months with the firstborn, and then 1.5 years with the secondborn. But when I went back to work, I became the head of unit for Africa for FCA, and we were in the phase of establishing our office network of regional offices into Africa. building everything new, all the how we work and with whom we work and how we finance ourselves and everything. And it was a lot of work. And we established offices into places which are slightly volatile, not that steady environments. It was in West Africa, it was Liberia and Sierra Leone, then there was DRC, South Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, Somalia. So it were environments where you had surprises, if not every day, at least every second day. And it ended up being very long hours of work. So what I did is that I dashed to work in the morning, I dashed to the daycare in the afternoon, and then took care of the kids during the early evening. And once they went to bed, I continued working. And I worked myself into a point that I had to take a break and breathe and rest for a year, actually.
Okay,
So
so
it was.
would that be in English called a burnout? Some level of
I don't know.
burnout, or
I think I managed to draw the line and step out early enough that it wasn't a burnout because I recovered quite soon. So I took 6 months of just kind of slowing my pace down and doing a lot of sports and being in the nature and spending easy time with my kids. And then the next 6 months I spent studying management and leadership. So I realized that this is not working out very well, and nobody in the family is feeling well, not only because I worked a lot, but because my husband worked a lot at the same time. And our firstborn was going to school. They go in Finland to school only when they're 7 years old.
Yeah.
So I kind of stopped it. Okay, we can't put him into school and not be there for him, either of us, and be worn out all the time. So I kind of took a time out and decided that this is now the moment to jump out, take it easy. And luckily our system here in Finland allows that. We even actually get a government subsidy for doing that. At the time we did. Now it's a little bit more complicated to do that, but I was one of the last ones that were allowed the sabbatical leave, where you actually are financially supported by the government.
Yeah, those are great things. What I just want to say here, I think the word burnout it has a lot of stigma, and but I've actually recently written some time ago. I wrote a blog and did a little bit research. So the burnout is at the different stages. So the one that we maybe have the stigma, or we sort of is the when someone collapses, or it's called enmeshment. So you were not there. But the lowest level of burnout, according to what I researched, is, for example, when somebody gets a new position and is just so excited and putting long hours. So it's already the first level of what's the burnout. And then comes, the chronic, at different levels come chronic stress and all that. But in any case, so you noticed that the work-life balance, or this is not how I want my life or my family life and my children to experience me as a mom and all that. So that's great. I think to allow yourself to have different parts of life.
Yeah, I think it's really important to listen to yourself and respect yourself as well, because we have to draw our limits ourselves. That's been a big learning for myself. No one else is going to draw my limits for me. Good managers do that to some extent, but there's always the individual responsibility of yourself. And that's definitely, I was very kind of, in my view, very young, in my early 30s. That's not necessarily considered very young in some other cultures, but in my early career years. So that's when you also want to give your everything because you're excited about your work, or you really feel the need that I really need to do this well. And that did teach me that, yes, doing things well is nice, but good enough is better, actually.
Yeah.
You don't need to push the extra mile for everything all the time. Choose the moments when you push the extra mile, but don't do it for everything. It doesn't pay off. Good enough is, and sometimes it's surprising how little is good enough. If you set your standards very high, and then you realize that, okay, I only managed to get here, but it's sufficient. Everybody's happy and things go forward, and it was good enough. So having that kind of mercy on yourself is important, and drawing your own boundaries is really important.
Yeah, I love that. I love,
Yeah.
the boundaries is indeed, I think it's something that we end up working with, in coaching. It's one of the key areas that we work
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Even boundaries, even just indeed to set boundaries to yourself, like time management. How do you manage, and how much do you do unpaid overtime? That's really about your self management.
Yeah.
In most cases, and learning to say clean yes and clean no, to choose.
Yeah.
Not to mention then the boundaries towards other people or organization and family and colleagues. That's a good learning. And also you talked about, I wonder if this is very common, because when you talked about, I think it sounded like you wanted to do everything perfect, and perhaps and that's good. I mean, it's good when it's not going over the boundary to do good work. That's and then when it goes overboard, then it becomes a sort of self-sabotage. And there the boundary is very important.
And often perfect is the greatest enemy of getting things done. Yeah. It just, if you go for perfection, you never get things done.
Yeah, because you never let them go. You are still
exactly
finalizing the finer detail.
Yeah.
So in positive intelligence, we call that stickler, being like having a stickler saboteur. I wanted to ask, because often people who choose the careers to, broadly saying now, to make the world a better place, like development cooperation, different kind of socio-economic impact work, or humanity, especially in humanitarian field. How much do you think for yourself, or what do you see for others, it is also about this being quite altruistic and like putting others before your own well-being, or the bigger goal before your own well-being?
Probably many of us who work in the humanitarian sector tend to be those kinds of people who put others first and ourselves only second. I think it's a very common feature in that sector, and it's not a bad feature as such, but you just have to realize it, that you can't always put others first, that sometimes you can serve people better if you put yourself first in some occasions. And recent neuroscience has proved that the brain needs the break. It's not efficient to work extensive hours after week, because the brain doesn't function that well anymore. So it's actually much more efficient to work maybe intensely for some time, but then you have to take a break, or do intense 9 hours, 8 hours a day, but then stop and do something completely different.
Yeah.
The brain needs it.
Exactly.
It's scientific.
And that's the thing. And this is also because I think Finland is scoring now a couple of years on the row as the happiest people or country. And I believe one of the indicators has to do something with the work-life balance.
Yeah, it's pretty reasonable here, I would say. It differs from company to company, and there are differences in the type of work you do. Of course, some professions seem to be where people do get overworked, even though we are in Finland and we should have a good work-life balance. But our holidays, based on our labor legislation, are very long compared to international, if we compare internationally. And you need that break, you need that pause to recharge and be a good worker again. And then we do have a legislation that supports 8-hour workdays, and in some professions you are able to stick to that. But then very often the higher you go up in the hierarchy, the more difficult it becomes to manage the work time. But I think that those who can be seen as successful in their professions are the ones that actually manage to manage their time and themselves to some extent, and to take care of themselves as well. And it doesn't matter really how you take care of yourself. For some people it's sports and nature, for someone else it's knitting and reading, and it can vary. Someone else likes to go to the movies or do something else, but just as long as you do it.
Yeah. What I'm also interested in, so for you, the when the children were small, so that was the like that, maybe the time when you told yourself, no, it's enough now. Need to get new game rules, and I need to stop myself doing what I'm doing to myself and my family. Then, what about later on? Have you then been able to stick to what you learned, and you also then have you then at some point you were quite a few years in Cambodia as a country director. So how do you compare being then on the field and in that leadership position and balancing the family? And so how did that time go?
It was much easier in Cambodia than it had been in Finland, because like you mentioned earlier, we had help at home, quite a bit of it. So that already is a big game changer. But then also I was more mature. I knew my own boundaries. I was able to respect them. I had been studying leadership and management. I had my personal coach that I really tried to improve my leadership and develop myself. Like, my professional development has been concentrating on the leadership aspect of it. And that helped me maybe to manage myself better. Also, the environment helped it. But then I also think that I was more mature as a manager to take care of others around me, to make sure that I don't overwork people around me. I have a very intensive way of working, but making sure that other people around me who are maybe not as intense as I am, that they don't, that my working style isn't meant to be a message to others that you need to do the same. Everybody can choose their own way as long as the job gets done.
Yeah. And that's also about our sort of personality. We're different.
It is.
And we like, even in leadership, depending on one's personality, we have like a naturally a bit different way to lead, and then we can learn and be flexible and try different styles, but we all have a sort of our own way. And that's great, a great thing, because I think often how do you call the team or the subordinates or whatever we want to call the team? Yes, that's a better thing. The team members, they might think, if it's not communicated and enhanced, they might think that we need to. This is often the leader's way becomes the organizational culture, and even like if there is a progression, or someone comes and takes over the position later, there is a huge this kind of I have to be like this one who used to hold the position. And actually we can do the same job with our different style, or like we might have even different values. Not totally, because if it's the same organization, I believe we may need to be aligned. That's great. Let's go. Let's talk more about the leadership, to being a female leader, and also like because gender equality or diversity. We can even talk about diversity more broadly. But what have you learned about being a female leader? And I believe that's still quite. Women are getting more and more into those leadership positions in the aid sector or development cooperation. But
absolutely.
I suppose there is still a lot of. It's not in every organization, I think, where
it's not in every organization. It requires that the organization adopts a willingness or a policy or a conscious choice that to assure gender balance also in the top positions. Otherwise, it doesn't really happen. Some organizations are more male dominated. Easily, the more conflict areas are more male dominated. Well, anyhow, but yeah, I come from Finland, where we've had female leaders for decades. So it's not really an issue in Finland to be a female leader. But when you go outside of Finland, and you can even into other parts of Europe sometimes, it might not be as common. But because I've been brought up, I've been educated in Finland, I don't really think of myself as being something special while being a female leader. But I have, of course, come across situations where it's been an incomprehensible situation that I might be the leader in the pack from people that come from different cultures and sometimes, like I said, even other Europeans from other generations, other backgrounds. But yeah, it is something that I do like to support around me when, especially, for example, when I was working in Cambodia, I did want to promote those young women that clearly had the potential to be something much more than assistants, and lead things and manage things and take the floor. And I think that's empowerment in practice.
Yeah.
That you give opportunities, you coach, you support, you make sure that they have the possibility to succeed, and kind of get that feeling of succeeding for themselves, which then brings about self-confidence, but then also around them, to show that it doesn't really matter what your gender is for the work you do, especially in these kinds of positions where it's what we call a white collar kind of profession. So it really, the gender doesn't matter, or other diversity aspects either. It's rather your personality, the way you work, your skills and ambitions, and so forth.
Yeah, and especially if the environment is also tuned into that like you mentioned somewhere, that the organizational policies, policies and or strategies are super important also to allow that individual growth and exploration and all that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, of course, maybe sometimes it can just happen. Well, I think, systemic support and then the people development. I think they just link to, they have to be linked together. If you work only with one, I don't think it's sufficient.
No.
So would you say you are a coach-like manager or coach-like a leader?
I do try to be, but then of course that needs to be combined with some level of very precise decision-making moments where you have to take the lead, where you have to take the responsibility, you have to make the decision. But when it comes to people, I tend to see the people not as where they are now, but what their potential could lead them into. And then I try to listen to my team members so that I learn to know them, that what are their aspirations and how can I support them to blossom. Because usually if people feel supported and accepted and treated not only as where they are now, but where they could be later, they start to perform better. It's very simple. So also your organization benefits from that kind of blossoming at this moment, even though that, especially with young people are meant to not stay very long necessarily in one organization, but develop and go further and take the next step, which means, of course, that brings staff turnover. But if you have that kind of coaching mentality, the word also spreads, and then you can, if you know your people, you can kind of build career paths and help more experienced ones support the younger ones, and I believe that diversity in a team is a very good thing, that you would have people from different backgrounds and generations and experiences, because that helps not only bring more insight into different topics, but it helps people to support each other. If everybody is the same, it becomes dull after a moment.
Yeah, it even that, and plus if there is no innovation exploration mode, it even becomes like a group think, and you get stuck. You don't evolve, or you don't grow as an organization, nor as people. I fully agree. What about then? This is I think it's so interesting. Was there any? Because I was just yesterday looking into the background of Finland. So obviously Finland indeed jumped quite quickly to implement all the UN recommendations on gender equality or gender parity at the workplace, and plus other history, being the first who got the full political rights, and then also the sort of economic rights after the wars. Women really entered, or during the war, women entered to the workforce and stayed there as more equal partners, and all that municipal support for daycare and things like that. So then growing up in that environment and then going to the other, which is part of our collaboration and partnerships, we go to the other country. Were there any, like, how did your, like, when you were encouraging the women to grow in the organization or in the projects, I believe also, what were the challenges, or were there any challenges?
Well, yes, of course, there's both external and internal challenges, because the external environment doesn't necessarily always support youth or female gender. So if you are a young woman in that kind of society, it's really hard to break through and have the internal courage to take those steps, because pioneer work is always hard. But then there's also, because of that cultural heritage or the environment, there might be internal issues that you don't have the self-confidence. You've never thought that you could actually do something because you're a woman, that you've built internal obstacles for yourself just because you've always been taught that you're a girl, you can't do that. You're a girl, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to be nice and quiet and behave. So I'm not saying that everybody would be mean and bad behaving and potty mouthed, but you can take the space that you need to do a task that you have for work. You don't need to be shy about yourself because you're a woman or because you're young. Even for young men, it's sometimes difficult in those kinds of societies where only older generations are appreciated, and the young people's perspectives are not necessarily seen as important. So supporting people to get over those personal obstacles, it's a slow transformation. It requires change, and change doesn't happen with a snap of fingers just like that. It always requires time, especially these kinds of changes that are to deal with attitudes or traditions or cultures. So it's very slow, but you need to take those steps slowly, step by step, and go towards the goal that you've set yourself. And then the external, sometimes because I did have young people in my team. In Cambodia in general, the population is young, so you would obviously have a lot of young people on your team. And then we work very closely with the government, and in government you might mainly have older men working. So sometimes I need to be there to support my younger team members, so that I bring the kind of authority into the room to deal with the older generation. But I always try to do it so that I give the floor to the younger ones. Even though I'm there and I do part of the speaking, I always make sure that they get to also show that they are credible, they are good, they are professional, and they can be trusted and they can be listened to. And then small steps, the trust is built. It's all about trust building when you face the external challenges, and then when it's about internal challenges, it's more about the psychological security that needs to be there. In every transformation, in every work environment, you have to have the psychological security so that you can step out of your comfort zone. Because stepping into your discomfort zone, it's always a little bit exciting and scary.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, not all workplaces are psychologically safe, or all. A lot of people don't have that trusted or safe relationship to their supervisor.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or other colleagues, and So and that's also when I see. What would you advise? Let me ask from you. What would you advise for a person who is in a workplace that is not supportive for the transformation and growth and all that? How, I mean, other than just quitting and getting a new job, what kind of recipes for resilience do you think there could be?
That's a tough question, because if it's in the structures, it's a big battle to start changing. If it's not in the organizational culture to be supportive, if it's not in the structures to be supportive of any kind of diversity, it's a big battle. And then you have to kind of, again, listen to yourself. That, are you up to it? Can you be the pioneer to change that? Sometimes you can, but if you feel that you're not, then I do think that changing the environment by quitting is a valid option. It's not giving up, it's opting for something better for you. But then if you really want to take up those pioneering work and start changing the structures and culture, it needs the management buy-in. It needs a lot of listening and about hearing and being heard by your colleagues, by the managers, by the top management. So it really, changing an organization's culture requires everybody being part of it, being willing to be part of that change. Because the culture is everybody in the organization. It's the little acts and deeds that we do in our everyday work life. If, for example, there's disrespectful talk about certain kind of people or people in general, that shouldn't be acceptable at a workplace. And then that has to be corrected by the management. But it's also a responsibility of individuals, once again, that you don't badmouth about your colleagues, that it's not acceptable. It's not a thing that you do at a workplace. So it requires everybody to change that kind of. I've seen those changes happen. It's quicker when the management really sets a line that this is not how we operate in this organization. And it can be made very clear in very nice ways as well. But it has to be consistent, and there has to be limits.
Yeah, what I've seen in my work in coaching is that there is or what we teach when we want to empower individuals is to say that you cannot alone change you can't really change the other person, but you can change yourself. And then whilst you do some changes in your communication, or you understand the personalities or the organizational culture or whatever it might be, by not reacting maybe the same way than you have been reacting, by learning certain tools, that you can actually then even influence through your own behavioral changes to the behavior of others. but when like you say, if there is no buy-in at the management or higher management or leadership level, there's quite little to do as a one individual, and then we actually start working on the cushions for the time being, so that you don't necessarily need to just quit, but that you can transition smoothly.
Yes.
sort of. I mean, why would you as a professional now need to quit and then have be in between jobs and all that? If you are trying your best, and it's not about that you are not performing, but maybe there are those bottlenecks or just not a healthy organizational culture.
Yeah.
And I believe that can be quite tough, especially if you are far from your family, your loved ones, like you are, if you are alone somewhere in a field work.
Yeah. It's always good to have a support network wherever you are, to build it around yourself and to find those trusted people that you can lean on when you need that.
Yeah. So you also mentioned you have Saara is not my client, but she mentioned that one of the way she was supported and all the support structures that you had when you were in Cambodia, that you were doing, or you had a coach. What kind of a role do you think a coach can play in supporting a leader?
I think a very important role. I had coaching sessions with my coach, maybe I would say 6 to 8 times a year, an hour at a time, an hour and a half sometimes at a time. And what we did is that I brought up issues that had been challenging for me at work, and she guided me into finding solutions. She guided me into taking a helicopter view and seeing that what can my role be in the whole thing to find a solution and to go forward. And it's not that she would give me answers. I would have to find them myself, but she would ask the right questions. And sometimes the right questions are the ones that help you out, help you see the light somewhere at the end of the tunnel. And I really do think that because being a leader it's a lonely job. You can't discuss certain things with your team members. You have to kind of safeguard them from some of the parts that are heavy in the leadership position. And then, of course, you can talk a lot with your manager. And I happen to have a wonderful manager with whom I could speak and talk through a lot of things. But an external coach was really helpful in seeing different kinds of options for solutions. And then what I did is that I also always tried some of them or one of them and worked my way through it with the thoughts and tools that my coach gave me. I found a way forward that would be good for me and my team. And I do think for a leader, because it's such a lonely job, it's really important to stop and reflect on your own leadership at times, because it helps you develop. And there's very little feedback often for leaders unless you specifically ask for it. And then again, it depends on the psychological security and its level, that how frank is that feedback that you get. But if you make it something regular, it becomes more and more frank at the end of the day. But I do believe that having a coach has been very, very good for me, at least.
What about do you like have peers that you can discuss that so that it's not so lonely? How have you utilized like a peer support networks or friendships or collegial?
With FCA, it's been wonderful. It's a really great employer for that kind of both individual coaching and group coaching. So for some time we had an external coach that for a smaller group. I think we were 3 country directors from different parts of the world. We got together with the coach. We chose the topics that we discussed, and the coach kind of facilitated the discussion, and it's really helpful. And then, of course, in every workplace, you would have your closest peers that you most easily talk to and sometimes befriend and have the kind of connection that you can easily open up. So of course I would chat to my colleagues or talk with them or ventilate, as we sometimes say, but also outside of the organization. But when you talk outside of the organization, you have to kind of remember to keep your own nest clean. So you don't, outside with other country directors, you can't always go into the dirty details of your own organization's dirty laundry. But because every organization has that, but it's just respectable to wash your dirty laundry within the organization, not outside.
Yeah. So, and I think this is something that companies like private sector coaching and mastermind groups and all that, or amongst the entrepreneurs or the executives in even those bigger companies. I think that has been going there for a long time. But it's great to hear that like is it Finnish Church Aid or
Finnish Church Aid, yes.
Finnish Church Aid, so that they've been implementing these things for some time, because I don't think it is at all every organization. It looks like often people need to, if they need, they have to reach out to themselves and pay it from their own pocket, and often it's late. Often it's maybe that now you are worn out or sort of
Finnish Church Aid really takes good care of that aspect as an employer. And I've also had with a couple of my teams over the years group counseling or coaching after a kind of either a crisis situation or a very, very difficult period of time. For example, there was a time in Finnish Church Aid when we had to lay off people. And although the layoffs in our unit were not huge in numbers, but it was a heavy process, and people weren't feeling very good, and we had to find a new way of coming together as a team. So we got external help for that, and the whole big team of 10 or 12 people, I can't remember how many we were, but we were a big team back then. We sat together in a circle and talked, and we kind of cleared the table. We set our goals for how we want to work together, where we want to go together, and then we had, I think, 2 or 3 sets of discussions with an external coach, and then it was much easier for us to carry on. And had we not done that, I, as the manager of that team, would have been a little bit in a hard place, because I would have had to clear all that out for myself with the team, and it was so much easier with an external person. And it helped us tremendously to go forward. So I do believe, I'm a great believer in all sorts of coaching in different kinds of life situations.
And I think that maybe takes us into this your sort of your own transition, because now you've moved to the role as a senior consultant to help other organizations with change and to transition and really focus on people. It would be interesting to know, because obviously development work is all about change, hopefully for better.
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't it? We aim in development work to change things for better, but we do. I mean, when somebody gets better, somebody else gets worse often in society. The change influences people in different ways. So how, tell us, it's interesting, like how much are you actually going with your like already the existing toolbox from the international development, and like I believe it's great to show them at the organizations and business, because I think development workers are the experts of change.
I totally believe that too. I do think that we are the experts of change, because the essence of our work is promoting change and provoking change and getting change to take place. And change takes place when people change their behavior or their way of doing things. It's not when you establish a system or a framework or an IT system or something else. It's when the people change. And people globally are pretty much the same. So there are some that are afraid of the change, some that embark on it very easily. And then what we do in with my current employer, CCEA, we make sure that the change takes place on the people level. So that's why we talk about people-driven change. And in developing cooperation, it's all about participation, ownership, stakeholder analysis, involving people, the right people. And that goes, if there's a change process going on in a global company, in the private sector, it's all about the stakeholders and the ownership and the communication and participation. So the tools are actually very similar because it's change with people.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter the setup, whether it's societal change, whether it's putting in place a new IT system.
Yeah. And I love the way you're saying that people are pretty much the same anywhere. I mean, there are different flavors and the system might allow
which is lovely too.
Yeah, but actually, it's actually even research-based, including over 50 countries and 500,000 people that are going into the root causes of our behavior, and they are 10 root causes. And it doesn't matter if you're a female or a male, or what complexion your skin is, or what is your religion, or your position in the company. So it's indeed looking at the humanity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
that's what I like about my new job as well, that although it's in a completely different environment and setup, it's all about the people and helping people stay on board in the transformations, and helping them understand what it is that companies want to change and how we get there.
Yeah. And that's I'm so interested in that too, and looking forward to as you stay and work there a bit longer, to hear more about your experience.
I'm pretty excited about too to discover that how much of my past experience I'm actually able to transfer into this new. There's of course a ton of things that I need to learn, new things, and that's pretty overwhelming. And the earlier today you asked whether I've been able to maintain the balance, and I have to say that during the past 2 weeks I haven't been able to maintain the balance. But I'm going out for a jog today, and that's my start of getting back into balance. But there are times when you can't handle the balance. You might have it over days or maybe even over some weeks, but then you lose the balance. But it's kind of the overall picture that is important, not the everyday necessarily.
Yeah, and I suppose as long as you know how to get, how, where is the boundary again? Where's the boundary? And then really to go back into, I always call it as a first class self-care, that you need to take definitely the best possible care of your own, holistically your own wellness. So look like now in the new job, you are taking very good care of your intellectual wellness, because you are learning new things and everything.
Yes.
But then your physical wellness, if it's the sleep, if it's the, fresh air.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all that is also important.
Yeah.
Wondering, any specific, because I think now I think we need to also wrap up, but any specific advice now, because globally everyone is going through the change, and this, because of the pandemic, it's been going on now, it depends where you are, but at least 1.5 years, even more in some other places. Any specific sort of insights on that, how that affects leaders, change managers or organizations or individuals? Any recipe there that you think would be?
I do think that as managers and leaders, paying attention on the well-being of your people is even more important now than during the pandemic, because we've all had to adapt to the changes very quickly, and those who are able to do their work from home offices might not have the best possible conditions at home to do that. There might be other kinds of stressful situations, and to allow the flexibility to find good solutions into those challenging situations is really important. Many organizations have managed to do that, and some pretty well. And we can see that there are people that blossom when working from home, and then there are people who really are not doing very well. And giving room to innovation for good solutions is really important, and listening to people that works for them, because the employer can't offer a similar kind of workspace for everybody when they're working from home. So what can be adjusted, what's in the limits of possible for each employer? I think there you need to spend some time there and think. And then those us who are working from home, of course not all the professions can be done from home. Then there's a lot of different kinds of security issues, health security things, that for those who are not working from home. But we who are, self-management, time management, and knowing where to draw the boundaries between the work and the not working area, that you have to be strict with yourself as well.
Yeah.
Have mercy, but be strict at the same time.
Yeah.
No,
I
think those are the two kind of different points of view to this.
Yeah, basically what you're saying, that take the individual needs into consideration, and
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So what about if our listeners want to follow you, where can they find you online?
I can be found online on LinkedIn, and my Facebook profile is much more personal, but LinkedIn is definitely somewhere where I can be followed. And I'm there with my face and full name, so it should be rather easy. And working with CCEA at the moment, so I'm somewhat active, not always. I'm nowadays I'm pretty good at prioritizing things, so I'm active when I have the time for it.
Yeah. But
on
anyway,
social media.
I'll put your LinkedIn profile, the
Great,
link
thanks.
to your LinkedIn profile there. And anything in relation to change or leadership, or something that you think you would, this is also an opportunity to promote something?
I personally like change. I like to embark on new journeys, and I'm curious about what I don't know. And I think that makes accepting change easier, because there might be so many new possibilities around the corner when you embark on a change journey, that you don't know where you're going to end, and that's okay in the beginning. Of course, it's good to have goals, but then who you travel the journey with is important. So try to have people who need to be part of the kind of, who are important at the end as well. They are important during the journey. So having those, whether it's personal transformation or professional, then try to have those people or organizations that are important in the end also traveling with you on the journey. Whether it's your own team or your own family or your coach or your organization or anybody, then just make sure that you're in good company.
That's a great thing. So enjoy the journey, so be present. And enjoy the journey, and make sure in a good company. I think you have to be a very people focused, of course, in this profession. But whilst that's your advice, that's a great advice. I will further share that advice.
Great.
And okay, I think those who are interested in for more recipes for resilience, please sign up for my newsletter. I'm also going to have some new group coaching programs and masterminds coming up. So sign up to my newsletter not to miss anything. And Saara, so much. It was so lovely to connect with you again.
Always lovely to chat with you, Pauliina.
Yeah, different ways, and also like taking contact after what 15 years and all that, when we
something like that
together.
Yes.
And I wish you, I mean, first of all, super still congratulations for your new position.
Thank you.
All the best for the new journey.
Thank you.
All right.
All the best for you as well into South Africa.
Thank you.